And welcome to our first episode of Life Support Live of
Happy
2001.
New Year!
Happy New Year, everyone. This is the weekly live show that explores how, and we have aired every Saturday of 2021. This is the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
He runs through that, but it really is a direct quote from one of the most famous starship commanders of all time. And as another famous starship commander of all time also said, wherever we go on this mission, we'll try to have a little fun along the way.
As we've had a lot of fun in 2020, and we'll keep having fun. Hello, everyone. I am psychologist Dr. Ali Mattu.
And I am Wild Mountain Man, Dr. Trek. Larry Nemecek. And one of us is actually a real doctor.
We'll leave it to you to decide who that might be. On this episode, we're talking about scarcity in the Star Trek universe, scarcity in our universe, and how those two come together, what we can learn from all of this. And before we get to that, let us know what is your favorite episode of Star Trek that's dealing with scarcity. But Larry, for everyone here who might be joining us for the first time,
the comics.
What is this thing? What is Life Support Live? What are we doing here?
What is this thing called Life Support Live?
Every Saturday it comes in the morning and leaves by noon.
With its own set
Pacific
of
Standard
rules. Thank you, Jerry. No, hey everybody. Yes, Happy New Year to all of our Life Support Live family. And if you're new here, if you've made a New Year's resolution to go try new things or new crazy, wacky things, or actually things that might help you a little, or all three, you've come to the right place. We say we go boldly through uncertain times. This show, the product of the pandemic, cancellations of a con panel, we geek out on Star Trek every week under the guise of a theme. While we've got Fresh Trek, we're going with what aired this week on, well, now Discovery. But we'll always have a theme, as we do this week, which is scarcity, this hand, there. But we go through the treks. We have fun, we geek out, and then we also leave you with some thoughts to ponder in your daily life, thanks to Dr. Ali and his counselor's log and his away mission. And I will do a little deep dive later on. We call it the K3 factor in honor of the only mention of mental health in the original series. But we'll deep dive even some backstage Star Trek for you, again with this theme today. So, welcome everybody.
Welcome everyone. I just love our comments. Thyrin on Twitch.
For a long time at the beginning, so Dr. Ali at least can look at the chat while I'm just yakking.
Yeah, yakety yak. Please do come back, Dr. Trek. Theron on Twitch says, "Glory to you and to your house." What a way! A little Klingon to wake you up in the morning is always is always great.
Hello, Theron. Though, if you're new to us, thank you for being there on Twitch. Yeah.
And folks, like I could love another sci-fi franchise. I'm wearing my Back to the Future shirt. Folks are like, What's the dealio there? I can love this. Although Scott is right. At this point, Ollie does have a scarcity of Trek t-shirts. I think I've worn every Star Trek t-shirt I have on the show. I don't know what episode this is, Larry. This is episode 30.
This is 38.
38. I don't have 38 plus Star Trek or t-shirts. So I think we might have exhausted my.
Are you sure? Nuan probably thinks you have 38 t-shirts.
Oh, she probably thinks I have a lot more than that.
3,800. 47.
So, folks, we were off last Saturday for in observance of things. I don't even remember now at this point why we were off.
Celebration of lights. Oh wait, that was Data's Day. Okay, wait.
Yeah. So it was not Captain Picard today. I know. I'm sure it was some pretty big holiday. So we have 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery to catch up on, and both episodes dealt with some aspect of scarcity. Scarcity has been a big theme this season. Scarcity of dilithium. And Larry and I were talking about this, and this sort of maps onto a lot of what's happening in this world right now. We saw a lot of scarcity in 2020 with certain supplies. We're now seeing very much a scarcity with the supply of the coronavirus vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Larry, when we started this, there was no
Some
vaccine.
would say a scarcity of common sense, but I won't go there right now.
Well, though, and as we talk, we're going to get to that in Counselor's Log. There's very much a close relationship between that, but there isn't enough supply of this vaccine, and there's also big disparities between countries that have access to it. Countries that have a lot of money, countries that don't have a lot of money. So this seemed like a really great, as this season of Star Trek Discovery keeps doing, Larry, it is somehow very much applicable to our times, even though it was written in an era before the pandemic.
Yes, it's well, and there was if we're talking about this week's episodes, and guys and gals, we're doubling up this week. We've got 2. We've got Sukal or RuPaul or whatever the name of that episode was last week.
Sukal, RuPaul would be a different TV show.
I know.
And there is a Tide, episode 11 and 12.
And there's an Ajax. And there's a Biz, and there's it's the Sog of the laundry detergents that have died. Okay, there's an Oxidol.
I get it now.
Yeah, it's bad, but it was there.
Good dad joke. Larry's representing.
See, can I just say something? There was a time when I was a kid that dad jokes were just bad jokes. They were grade school humor jokes. They were like what you got in your Jack and Jill or in your weekly reader or whatever. When I was a kid, the same things that people say now, I said when I was 6, and it was no big deal. It was like, oh, Larry, that was a dumb joke.
Those folks grew up and became dads, and now they're
it's
dad
jokes. Jokeism, and I don't like it. I stand for the repeal of the. Yeah, I'm standing.
This is the line that must be drawn.
Yes,
right here.
And no father.
No. Oh, nicely done. I will drink to that.
Nicely. No, I'm just saying, what I was trying to say was we're wrapping up we're doubling up on 2 themes. We picked a theme today. I know feels like it especially applies to the last episode, but on the other hand, it applies to the whole arc. And if you remember, when we talk about these 2 episodes, yes, they're in this century because of the time suit and blah 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 and Red Angel and the sphere data and control and all that leftover garbage from last season. But the pushing, the inciting incident this year has been the burn and all of that.
The burn
and the chain and the dilithium necklace and whatever else. So anyway,
Larry, they say time is the fire in which we burn. They say that. People say that. I don't know if you're aware of this.
Some say, I feel like I'm on an alternate network now. Some say that time is the fire in which we burn. Well, my point is that the burn and the inciting incident, which is what was revealed in Sukal. The only way I can remember the name of that episode is I have to make up the fact that it was about a girl named Sue. Or a boy named Sue, actually would be more apt. And once I can say Sue, otherwise I wind up with some other combination of letters that never comes out right. But my point is that scarcity may not have been the main thrust of Sukal. It may have been about that central title character and how weird that was. And then reflecting on, it's like, really? This whole season is about this guy and his temper tantrum? But scarcity, I think, fits for both. But I will say this, and are we getting serious now? Are we out of joke stage, at least for these 10
When are we ever getting serious?
I said at least for these 10 seconds. If you put up, I just want to start off with something. I mean,
sure.
we can, scarcity is a thing. So the scarcity of dilithium is fueling the plot of this whole series, series for the Brits, season for Americans. So there's dilithium under a jewelry store like force field in the season premiere.
It's a red matter force field.
The tide is you, or
red
the hero
programmable matter.
Something. Yeah, yeah. So you got the idea right off that dilithium was very rare. It's even rarer than it normally is when people, go to war over a dilithium planet or whatever. But what got me this week, I can't decide whether to start off with this or bring it up later. So I'm just going to do it now.
It's hot. Let's strike while the iron's hot, Larry. It's on your mind right now.
Oh damn! I just realized I didn't. Did I not? I didn't send you. I didn't send you an image with a caption underneath it, did I? Damn.
I don't think so. But I have a lot of images related to a scene from this week's episode, which I think you're probably referring to.
Well, I'm referring to that scene, but I didn't send the one that I made.
Is it about the apples?
No, everybody kept going. I said this on Twitter, and I didn't say it. I just said, "Oh my God, this." There was a line that struck me. Yeah. As a part of, here is Star Trek speaking for today's contemporary audience and themes, and that's the old Star Trek thing, modus operandi. But in all of Kurtzman Trek since 2017, in all of the Secret Outpost, all of Discovery, all of Picard, all of Lower Decks, this line knocked me off my chair as far as Star Trek speaking to today, right now.
Yeah.
And I just went, whoa. I mean, I went back and listened again, and then I went back and made the best caption that I could, image, and then I forgot to send it to you. It's during the negotiation scene.
Yes. Between
Admiral Vance and Osira. And it's when they go through the whole thing, and as an audience, I think the upshot of this show, aside from, oh, look, they got the bridge crew working together again. Yeah, it's this scene, but it's like several scenes. What happens at the end of this sequence, and again, we can get back to scarcity, because it's the scarcity of dilithium that actually split these two apart and is driving them back together. The setup that we've had has been a typical, here's good Starfleet Federation and here's bad villain, and she's even Orion. Ooh. They're wearing white hats and green hats or something now, I guess, so to speak. And about the time that this episode surprised us, and when she's talking sense, you've got Eli in there, the truth-telling hologram, or the truth-sensing hologram, reading the biofactors, and she's actually trying to negotiate. She's actually making concessions, and it's turning, it's like, what? Now we're out of cardboard villain here, cardboard villain minister priestess, and we're actually into something meaningful. And that got me to sit up and take notice. And her having her, and with Eli being the fact checker there. It's like, so what's going to stop this? This is like an amazing scene. It's rolling along. The rest of the show is kind of predictable. Look, the bridge crew is being heroic together. Yay. What turns it back to being, okay, what's the conflict is when he demands that she atone for her crimes, turn herself in. She won't be a legitimate, she won't be a responsible negotiating party in the eyes of popular opinion. Because of what she's done, she can't run away from that. So it's great that you're having this revelation now. It's great that you come in to do this, but no one will ever trust you because of your record. That's obvious. And she's butting, and that's the deal. That's the breaking point, right? That's when she leaves, and he wonders if he pushed too hard, too fast. But en route to that moment, when he's putting his position out there and saying, you cannot represent your people in this because you have no credibility.
No grumba, yes.
You have no credibility as a reformer, as a person who can be trusted to negotiate these big, hard questions. She says, oh, come on now. I'm saying this is a new leaf. Look what I've given you. Everything I've written down is true. Can't you see that we're willing to turn over a new light?
Yeah.
And a piece of me went back to, I keep wanting to say proximity. It's the Voyager episode that I didn't pull a slide from. Equinox. It reminds me of good people gone bad who want to get back to their goodness without atoning for the bad. It's easy to be a cardboard villain from birth.
Yeah.
But the line that got me, and then I'll get back to the regular scheduled show, was when she says, basically she's saying, oh, come on, we're living in the now. We're looking ahead. I'm offering you all this. Let's move along. And the Admiral, Vance, says, she says, why are you looking to the past? And he says, the past is the only light with which we can see the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
went, bang. I'm thinking we've had 2 or 3 generations here in our country. I'm thinking of the Nuremberg trials after Germany.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody had said after the war, you know what, we've ruined their country, isn't that bad enough? Why do we have to punish the German people and what's left of their leadership? Why don't we just all say they surrendered and we move on? What have we done that? We didn't, because it was a cleansing for us, but it was a cleansing for the German people. That's just one historical example. We've had a lot of cases in history the last 40, 50, 60 years where people who did horrendous bad things that completely affected the flow of history and millions of individual people's lives go totally scot-free. And people say, well, let's heal and move forward. Why are we looking backwards? We need to look forward. And I'm talking about political issues. I'm talking about economic issues. I'm talking about, at times, very much legal issues in serving time. And I thought this was a case where Star Trek is saying what I always say, which is you cannot move forward. I mean, like the Nixon pardon by Ford after Watergate. It was like, well, we're healing the country. It's like, no, that allowed a whole generation of young bucks to feel like they had to avenge that. Or find an equal. Well, the other side had to do something bad too. We're all bad. Everybody does something bad. You picked on us. You went beyond the bad. Everybody knows everybody does it. So now we're going to get back and pick at you for decades. So I'm sorry, I got off on a rant here. But I was just like, whoa. And it didn't come at you like, okay, now we're going to give you a little political meme here, or a little ethical morality, a big picture generational morality line. It just kind of came out of nowhere to me. And I was like, whoa. And the fact that they wrote this a year or two ago.
Yeah.
And we're just now seeing it. And it speaks so much to our times right now. Okay, that has nothing to do with scarcity.
Hey, well,
it's a scarcity of justice and common sense.
No, what I was going to ask you,
the pain and the damage that some things cause that get papered over to move in the name of, let's move ahead, let's move on and look forward. Don't worry about, which is now you're into atonement and judgment and justice, which could be another topic, I know. But I just wanted to mention that. And then my secondary thing was, me personally, everybody gets out of Star Trek what they want to get. But I was like, have I had such a reaction to a line of current modern Star Trek since 2017? And I don't think I had. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now back to our regularly scheduled theme.
Well, what I was going to ask you is, what did you think of these last 2 episodes? But so your answer is right there. That was a really beautiful scene, and this admiral, our relationship with the 32nd century Starfleet has been a little wibbly wobbly. We haven't really understood quite what their intentions are, but Admiral Vance,
or even all that they're grappling with,
or all that. Yeah, we have a very small window into who these people are and what they're dealing with. But this admiral keeps showing us in these small moments what those Federation values are. Mm-hmm. We see it right here with that was an incredibly beautiful scene to see it unfold. It was
after we had all been
sense,
tricked into thinking, wow, she really is trying to give up a lot. Wow, yeah. She really is trying to make peace. This is not just a cardboard cutout villain. She's,
Well, I think both are true. I think she is trying to make peace, and at the same time, she does not want to be held accountable for the things that she's done. It's a beautiful scene where both of the players in the room, or I should say all 3 of them, including the emergency lie detector hologram. Love the bow tie, by the way, that character has. They start in one place, and by the end of that episode,
Kurtzman Trek sense of humor and costuming. That's what it is. Okay.
Speaking of costumes, I think Jared was saying the more he sees those Starfleet costumes, the more Bajoran they look. I really love those costumes. Yeah, I love they're all 3D printed to make them look even more futuristic, and I just I really adore these future costumes. It's really beautifully done. Mm-hmm. But that whole scene was really lovely.
And there's a lot in that scene. There's a long arc to that scene, and it does. Yes. It's very much about and I sent you one too, a couple. the
Yeah.
you said it, the Apple scene. That I think it's like everywhere I look, I think of this whole show, but it's like everybody has glommed onto the Apple moment. But
Yeah,
that
the
gets
Apple
back to the
moment is
scarcity. Yeah.
yeah, the Apple moment does get at scarcity, and we're going to talk about that. But Admiral Vance, in a few episodes prior, was talking to Saru and saying like, we don't leave people behind, Saru. Like, this is all we have. All we have is each other. So there's been some wonderful moments where they're reflecting back what it means to be a member of the Federation in this very difficult future. So I'm with you, Larry.
Hmm.
And when we look at this season and what everyone's grappling with in this future through the lens of scarcity, I think it makes a lot more sense. I'm going to tie back to this in the counselor's log, but why don't we open it up to the briefing room here? Let's talk about how scarcity has played out in the wider canon, and there are a lot of different areas we could start out here, and let us know in the comments too what episode of Star Trek really resonates with you when it comes to the idea of scarcity, and this conflict between desire and resources, needs and resources, when there is this mismatch, when there is not enough of something to go around.
Yeah.
And
Or a perceived finite amount.
yes. Yeah. And this is where I'll go off of my soapbox and say we're not really talking about replicators and lack of money here. Even if you have replicators, or even if you're in some kind of post-money economy, scarcity still exists. There's not enough holodecks to go around on the Enterprise. Like, people you can't replicate dilithium, as we see in this whole season of Star Trek Discovery. There's always going to be some kind of mismatch between.
You can recrystallize existing dilithium, but you still got to go find. Yeah.
Yeah, you still got to go find some.
You still got to go have your dumb mining treaty plot somewhere. Which is still, gee whiz technology. I'm still not used to it. I still think it's a ridiculous cheat. But okay, fine. So was warp drive and transporters in 1964. But it's like, on one hand, they've still got incredible technology. It's just this one thing that's fueling. And it's, now that you've heard her little speech, the Emerald Chain is trying to get to non-dilithium based warp drive. It's almost like she's championing, solar batteries for cars, or electric batteries in cars, instead of going with big oil or something. It's like she could have been her own green movement there. Okay.
Yeah.
No pun intended on the Orions. But it's amazing. They're all gleaming. They are all in these brightly lit, gleaming environments here at Starfleet and the Federation. But they're talking about scarcity. It's really hard as a writer, I'm thinking, to say, okay, we have to have something driving the split, driving a shrinking Federation, where they're not in the driver's seat. They're on the odds, and where the Emerald Chain is actually a viable option to them, because they're living on the streets, as it were, the space streets. They're getting the job done for people. I don't know. The space streets of San Francisco. That used to mean, the alleys behind Starfleet. Okay. And it's like, I guess they had to say this whole thing about you can't replicate dilithium, you still got to go mine it. What would be the Achilles heel of even 32nd century 31st century, 32nd century Starfleet is it's got to be dilithium. So I can see why, if they're going to set up this story arc and this paint them into a corner, where the writers had to go to get there. And it's like, because very little else, we talk about replicators and post-scarcity economy. A lot of people today, my friend Manu, that wrote a book called Trekonomics, talks about this. Because if you can and they got into it on DS9 when they jump out of the gate talking about, oh, go press Latinum, la la la, because we've had no money in the Federation because we have replicators. And people, they're still working out exactly what that looks like. But then we've got Ferengis who are doing deals. And along the way, we talk about Klingon Darsex and Cardassian Lex and all this. Everybody else has a currency and uses a currency for trading. And we've gotten into this, I think, a couple of times, and people can do that. But here you've got a space station that's the the Casablanca or whatever, the crossroads of the world, and you've got Ferengis, and they're very much in the middle of currency. And gold press latinum was invented for DS9, and it took about 5 seconds for somebody said, "Wait a minute, if you've got replicators, we're back to that old thing about why does the Federation not need money?" And everybody else does. Okay, well, maybe they're not as broad-based as the Federation. They went different ways. But when they finally explain who mourns for Morn, and I should have brought a slide for it, but I didn't. When they finally, it took 6 years, 5 or 6 years, to finally figure out that gold press latinum is special and you can base a currency on it because it's not replicable, because it's actually liquid latinum. Oh, I sent you a thing, little glass image.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So it's actually, they finally figured out what makes it special and not just, oh, we can replicate that. It's liquid latinum suspended inside a gold brick or a gold, whatever. So
worthless
it's like,
gold.
Yeah. It's worthless gold. Yeah. So they finally said, well, here's what's valuable about latinum, makes it a trading commodity and the basis of a currency. Because we go back to saying, you can make lead or gold in a replicator. They're all just molecules. So if we can put in a pattern file and make either one, why is either one valuable? We can make anything with a replicator, basically. You can't make dilithium, so there's value to the lithium. Anyway, it's this aging thing, and yeah, things turned. And you have a soapbox about wanting to look at Earth history and when that turned.
Yeah. And I mean, when we were talking
but what
about
I'm saying is the writers today, given all of that, they had to find something they could go back to, even 800 years in the future, to blow all that up. And they went with about the only path they could with the whole dilithium.
Yeah. No, I think I see where you're headed now, and I agree. That is one way to create the type of intergalactic. Intragalactic, I should say. We don't know what's happening in other galaxies, but intragalactic chaos that's happened here and the unstabilizing force. I totally agree with you. And scarcity doesn't always refer to tactile resources. Scarcity, we definitely see scarcity of time. I was just watching Shore Leave the other day, the TOS episode, and it's very clear.
We have no time to talk about... No, I'm sorry.
It's very clear that Captain Kirk, like all the other captains that come after him, have very much a scarcity of time. And they act in ways, when I get into the counselor's log, that are very similar to people who might have scarcity of food, of housing, of other resources. There's the same types of traps that people fall into. So scarcity can refer to a lot of different things, but maybe we should talk about, you just kind of set us up for talking about praxis and talking about scarcity of resources and the unstabilizing effect that those can have on geopolitics. We see this in Star Trek VI, where praxis exploding due to overmining, if I remember correctly, very much mirroring the events of Chernobyl. Chernobyl was not about overmining, but it was very much a human-made, actually social disaster that resulted in a human social psychological disaster that had a huge devastating impact.
But human error, as far as
human error. Yeah. But the what Chernobyl represented for the Soviet Union and what Praxis represented for the Klingon Empire, there's a parallel there. But it's very clear in that Starfleet briefing, the one I quote so often here, let them die. Prior to that briefing, the Klingon Empire cannot survive. It will die without some type of assistance, without some type of peace. They can't continue to fight this war. And Kirk says, let them die for a reason, because of everything he's experienced. And Spock is sort of reflecting back, Jim, we can't let that happen. Can you imagine what would happen to this whole region of space if we let the Klingon Empire die? And Larry, I'm going to do something here that I'm going to add a little texture to the canon.
Texture, not trivia. Okay.
Texture, not trivia.
Hashtag.
Based on the pilot to Star Trek Discovery, we now know how many factions there are out there in the Klingon Empire.
Many
We
houses.
know, and houses, and how hard it has been for them to unify, and how that must be some kind of stabilizing effect in this region of space. And so you can see when Spock says, like, we can't let this happen, Jim, that's the risk. If you let this large entity fall, due to the scarcity that they're going to experience now, we're all going to suffer. It reminds me a little bit of the 2000 economic collapse. You know, all these banks, these too big to fail banks, and how they got bailed out. 2000, what did I say?
You said 2000, but yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Well,
so
there was
9/11.
also, there's the dot-com bust. There's been a lot of disasters
That was,
here.
yeah.
But 2008, as much as a lot of people around the world, especially Americans, hated the fact that we were bailing out these banks, you let the banks fall, and eventually people will not be able to get credit. People will not be able to buy the things that they need to, and we're in this big, giant mess. So, yeah, scarcity
Can I also say
can have
that
huge
whole...
yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Can
No,
I
go
just
ahead, go
say
ahead.
that the whole
Please.
that whole Star Trek 6 let them die we can't plot was exactly flip that to the Romulans and you've got the plot of the backstory and plot of Picard. Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, basically you do. And
one person standing up to do what's right, even though and in Star Trek 6's case, Spock pulling Kirk back to what needed to be done was what needed to be done, even in a group setting of the command staff there. In Picard's case, they didn't get that, mainly because you had a mole working. If you listen to Clancy, and it sounds like, and others maybe, it sounds like there was a real morass of intention in the Federation anyway, as represented through Starfleet. Or maybe it was all the work of Commodore and her mole and being there. And if she hadn't been a mole inside Starfleet, egging all that on and manipulating it to her aims, maybe it wouldn't have gone the way it did. But we don't know. We don't know how much power she had over, the council and the command staff to ignore Picard and go against what he wanted to do. But
I have a very important correction I need to make. Thank you, Cairo. I meant cosmopolitics, not geopolitics, is what Praxis is all about. I also want to say before we forget, because we might forget. Someone was saying, are we still talking about Star Trek Discovery? Because there's a lot more we could talk about here, like the fact that we haven't seen Klingons yet. But I just want to mention, Jared reminded us that we don't have a scarcity here of Star Trek. This was the 800th episode or 800th hour.
It's here's the thing. And my friend Aaron Harvey did a great graphic. People have been watching this thanks to. I realize there's some counter going by that does this, but maybe it's the Memory Alpha thing where they do an overall counter of all Star Trek shows, and it was getting up to 800. I think that's where this started. But it was the 800th title. Now, years ago, because we've got, and this is all, when we say hours and half hours and 2-hour movies, it's all rounded off. But basically, for years, I've used a count of giving an hour for episodes, 2 hours for the movies, half hour for the animateds, and now short treks, like even 15
5 minutes.
quarters. Quarters. And I've kept my own tally when people say, "Oh, we've had so many," to make apples and apples, whether they're made of shit or anything else, or oranges to oranges. To keep the count meaningful, I've kept my own hour count. So everybody was going on about it. This was the 800th title. What's amazing is I sat down and I updated the last year or two. I updated my hour count where I convert things to those. And yes, I know, like I said, they're 45 minutes or 48 minutes, not, or 12 minutes, not 15 or whatever. Movies run long and run short, but that code, this was also the 800th hour by that. I was going to have it be a little short treks caught things up. by giving short treks 15 minutes, it's like it caught up for anyway, and having more animateds be half hour, having Laura Dex come in and be. I was amazed because I wound up with the count. Who knows if that'll ever happen again? But anyway, so yes, so my point here was whether you now somebody was measuring the actual timings of all these episodes and all these movies. Yeah. And came up with something, probably a little short than that. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And I thought I was being anal, but it's fine. It's cool. It's Star Trek fans.
I'll just share one little story from the week.
So I'm saying 800 titles, 800 hours. It's amazing. So yes,
it's amazing, and no scarcity of it. And you know what's great about that, Larry, is there's a type of Star Trek story out there for you, whoever you might be. Speaking of, a friend of mine came up to me this week. Didn't come up to me because we're in coronavirus times. This is over Zoom. Yeah. Otherwise, it would be like, hey, back off. What are you doing here?
It's that new series, The Masked Star Trek Fan. Okay.
So a friend of mine came up to me and said, hey, Ali, I finally did it. I watched my first episode of Star Trek. I thought you'd be interested to hear this. And I was like, wow, that's very exciting. Cool. What episode did you watch? And they said, oh, it was the one where they beamed down to the planet.
He didn't. He?
Yes.
I'm saying he.
Yes, she.
She.
And I almost spit out whatever I was drinking, and I was laughing so hard. And they're like, was that a bad one to watch? And I said,
you
no,
didn't
that's
watch the one where they beamed down to the planet, did you? Yeah.
I was like, that's like every episode of this 800th hour adventure you're about to go on.
Come on, every other one.
Every other one. The other ones, they're on the ship because they couldn't afford Planet Hell. They couldn't fire up Planet Hell that week. Yeah. Oh gosh. Anyways, I thought all of our lifers would. For the record, it was Encounter at Farpoint. It was episode 1 of TNG.
Next Gen. Did she understand? Did you tell her? Did she understand later or?
Oh, I explained. Oh, trust me, I explained.
This is a common plot device in every other Star Trek, at least. Yeah.
No, but it kind of makes you. There's this thing in psychology called the curse of wisdom, which is it's hard to unknow what you know. So it's hard to remember what it was like to not know what the moon is.
When you hear about someone who's a new fan and they say I'm going to watch so and so for the the original series or Next Gen for the first time, and a little piece of you is envious.
Yeah.
To have fresh eyes. Yeah.
They get to experience this all for the first time. We can't remember what it was like to look at a phaser and be like, why are they walking around with hot glue guns, as my wife likes to say. And I'm like, sweetie, those are not hot glue guns. But when you have the curse of knowledge, you can't unknow what this is like. So hearing from new fans who are experiencing this for the first time, it's always
there are a lot of podcasts out there where that's the conceit of the show, or they pair a pair of new eyes with a veteran. It's whatever, they're friends. There's dad and daughter, friend and friend shows where they're new. I mean, that's a good conceit, and it's love. I get it. When I was in grad school, in theater grad school, I remember one of the professors talking about sitting behind, going to his let's say Romeo and Juliet. He's sitting in an audience. Remember what that was like? He's sitting in an audience to see some production of Romeo and Juliet, and he's already thinking about the lighting, and he's watching what's going on and how they're staging it and what the what era they set it in. It's not, period. And his head is all into this stuff, and he all of a sudden, toward the end of the show, he realizes there's a little girl in front of him and like her dad next to her or something. And all of a sudden he hears the little girl say, oh no, he's poisoned himself. He doesn't know that she faked it. And she went, oh no. And the observer went, it was like totally shook him out of all of his 47th level deep dive on the production. And he was like, wow, how great it is to be seeing Romeo and Juliet for the first time and not knowing how the plot, what's going to happen to the plot. But it's that over, and we have that over and over again. It's like, wow. And when you find, or when you've been around the block with Trek once or twice, and you realize, and it's hard to do this now with IMDb and Netflix, but that time when you realize somehow there was a show, years later, there was a show you'd missed, and you get to see it for the first time, and oh my God, it's like the lost show for me, and I get to see it or whatever. It's the reaction people had to Star Trek Continues a lot, and a lot of the fan films that were really above the bar in Phase 2, I guess. People are like, I heard that over and over again. I felt like I just found a lost episode. Speaking of scarcity, we better get back to the topic.
The comment section has brought up a few great examples from Voyager, actually.
Voyager was like all about the scare. I mean, I threw you one that was kind of an easy one there and sometimes it didn't quite make. Having these wonderful things.
Oh, the soup, the Bolian soup episode. This one.
This is from the pilot when he goes in to get but this is pre their burn. This is pre jump to the Delta Quadrant. But they wound up having. I did that to illustrate. Later on, they have replicator rations.
Yeah, that's what Charlotte mentioned.
But the holodeck's
replicator rations. And then more recently, we got a comment. About the Kazon. As much as I dislike the Kazon, as unworthy they were of assimilation by the Borg, one of my favorite little trivia moments right there. But the Kazon are very much a good story about scarcity here.
They sound like the Emerald Chain. I was laughing about when the Emerald Chain people show up with fiber hair that I'm going to get a little suspicious, but
and
that they thought the Federation was hoarding technology the way the Kazon thought Voyager was being a snob for not.
Yes.
When the Voyagers, she's trying to adhere to Prime Directive principles. And, although they have space flight. They're not Packlids. I mean, they may have overtaken it, but they're not. They know how to run their stuff, or at least keep it going, kind of.
Well, so Nathaniel brought up the Kazon story, and I'm very excited to talk about the Counselor's Log
and
today,
water on Ocampa too. But that's
water.
We try not to remember that. Okay.
I've always disliked the Kazon until probably just now, this very moment, because now I see them, looking at them through this light of scarcity, I see them very differently, and I think that'll make more sense when you get to the Counselor's Log. But
a little more lenient on the Kazon. They work.
A little more lenient. There's a lot of great episodes from Janeway wanting more coffee to
in that nebula.
To scarcity of allies to yes.
Oh, they're always after something berindium or duridium, or they even having a war. Anything that's high tech manufactured. How many times did they go chasing after some other culture's warp coils? I'm like,
yes.
Okay, gonna hotwire that in somehow. Okay.
Well, and flip things around. There's a lot of episodes where aliens are after replicator technology because they haven't seen any technology like this in this region of space, which is a very interesting way to think about it, where it's scarcity in the other direction. We sort of take that technology for granted in the alpha beta quadrants, but in parts of the delta quadrant they haven't seen this kind of stuff, or scarcity of knowledge as it comes to medical issues they come across. The phage is a great example of that. They have no idea what they're getting into. Neelix is supposed to help them out in these sort of endeavors, but sometimes they're just warping into the great unknown without any knowledge or anything to sort of help them navigate. Sabrina's bringing up the Herodians
they're another technology jealous. Would you say on the holodeck?
Yeah, let's go with technology jealous.
Tech jealous.
They're another example of that.
It lives to bite everybody on the butt because they are. So yeah.
And I agree with Charlotte. Coffee is a very serious matter. We have seen what happens to me when I have not had enough coffee yet. It ain't pretty, folks. It is not pretty. Should we The other one I really want to talk about. Someone mentioned this earlier. It might have been Charlotte actually about scarcity that's sort of imposed upon people. She brought up the
Mm-hmm.
example of the Bajorans and the occupation of Bajor and the destruction of their civilization, sort of as a result of that, which is a really great example. The other one that I brought up that I thought of, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is completely artificially created scarcity for control, is Ketracel White
Yes.
by the Dominion.
It's
So
part of the DNA, literally. Yeah.
it's quite literally a part of the DNA. For the 0.5% of you who aren't aware, the Jem'Hadar, if you're not, go watch Deep Space Nine. It is amazing. But
Some
Ketracel
would
White,
say it's the best track of all.
those some would include me in that statement. Jem'Hadar are bred in that really great episode where we first meet the baby Jem'Hadar that Julian sort of
Hmm.
tries to raise. We learn that
The
they are
Foundling. Oh wait, wrong franchise. Okay.
right, wrong. Yeah, close, but no replicated cigar there. The Jem'Hadar are genetically engineered, as much of the Dominion culture are, like the Vorta and all of that, by the founders, and they are engineered to be dependent, chemically dependent on Ketracel White, and they use Ketracel White to ensure their control over these soldiers. There are a few interesting storylines that we see over the course of Deep Space Nine, and that were hypothesized maybe in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 8, where maybe Jem'Hadar's play around with evolving beyond Ketracel White. But for the most part, we don't see Jem'Hadar being able to survive without this. And so there's a great scarcity of white. And there's that episode, Larry, you probably remember the name, where Sisko and crew are fighting against the Jem'Hadar, and there's not enough white left. And the Jem'Hadar commander says, meets with Sisko and says, "Look, I'm running out of white, and so my
I
people
think it's
are
Rocks
either."
and Shoals. There's
Rocks
a
and
lot
Shoals
of,
sounds right.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds
It's
right.
a
Season
it's a
6
it's
or
a war
7.
actual wartime episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And he
Hippocratic
says,
Oath is where Bashir tries to figure out why there's a genetically mutant Jem'Hadar that isn't addicted to
yes.
white, and he tries to replicate that, and they figure out that it's not replicate. It was just a one-time mutation. He can't
Yeah.
manufacture it. So yeah, we got little bits and pieces. But yeah, the Rocks and Shoals. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, I was
Yeah,
just gonna
play
say
that out.
they decide to go out in battle
Speaking
because
of
if they
scarcity.
don't, they're going to destroy each other because they're going to run out of white. And so this is, I think there's a lot of I'll go back to cosmopolitic implications here. There's a lot of implications here for society and how it might benefit those in power to keep other quote unquote classes of people under their control and to keep them dependent on different things, whether it's drugs or whether it's some other types of resources. Yeah,
I sent
please,
you an
Larry.
image from original series. I was really trying to.
Yeah.
And by the way, we get into this sometimes. They talk about they didn't call them replicators, and we had the food slots instead of replicators. But they had how many times in the original series did they, like going to Neural or going to the Nazi planet on Ecos, when they would say have ship stores or have the ship's computer make us native outfits.
Yeah.
But there was one time especially when even ahead of this is getting into the scarcity bit, but as far as replicators go, there was one time in Cat's Paw when they try to seduce Kirk and they throw a plate of gemstones at Kirk and his guys, and he's like, our computers can make these, and that's when when I was a kid, it was like, oh my God, if they can make gemstones, they can make gold. That's why everybody's equal, because, I remember being 15 or 16 and getting it then and going, oh, wow, that's a new paradigm. But some things were not replicable, and Xenite was one of them. and that's the mining on Ardana and the whole City, the two-tier caste system of the workers below and the intellectuals above. And they were a Federation member. Apparently, didn't get checked up on real closely. And they show up to get the Zenite to put down a plague. So they've got a scarcity issue there. And you get into the whole class war system that's about to blow up, and how good old Kirk and Spock intercede on the undertrod on their behalf. But that's like two scarcity bits going on. The Zenite is scarce, and they need it for the plague on the other planet, on whatever it was. But at the same time, there's a scarcity of how they're controlling, how the people with the power are controlling the society. Which is what you were getting into there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we're talking about that, I think there's a clear episode getting back to. This is again the problem with Deep Space Nine, as is now a trope of Life Support Live. Pretty much every episode could always apply to every theme with every character. But let's go to past tense. Past tense is the episode that we've often brought up on this show.
I almost don't think of this as the DS9. I think of this as like an Earth history episode. Thank you, Ira.
It does feel like it's its own thing. It feels like it's. I think there's like 10 episodes of Star Trek that feel like they exist outside of the whole continuum of Star Trek. And what I mean by that,
warp bubble,
yeah, they sort of rise above the series. I think City on the Edge of Forever is one of those. Tapestry is another one. Past tense. Yeah, there you go. You got your Tapestry reference. Even though we did a whole watch along.
I was going to say, how far can we get without a Tapestry reference? But go ahead.
Apparently, 1 hour and 1 minute is how far we can get without.
Quantify. Okay.
If folks haven't seen our Tapestry watch along, we did a watch along this past Tuesday where we watched Star Trek. Monday? Gosh, Larry, I am out of it. We watched Star Trek The Next Generation's Tapestry, and we sort of talk about it, and it was a fun time. So make sure you check that out if you haven't seen that yet. But Charlotte says past tense feels too real now, and it very much has come true in one way or another, especially if you look at San Francisco. I live about 40 minutes away from San Francisco. I'm going to San Francisco later today. And
be careful.
The city has, as Silicon Valley and as the tech culture and the wealth of tech has really skyrocketed in the last 20 years in this area, the inequity in San Francisco has become so pronounced that past tense really has come true in some way.
You totally see it there. That's what they're doing. The tech community there is the people that find Dax to be the contrast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's absolutely exists here, and the great inequity of poverty, of food, of how in this episode, the most damning thing of this episode, Larry, is when Bashir is so dumbfounded and he's like, I just don't get it. How could they let this get this bad? How can they just stop caring?
Like the image I sent you.
Oh, I should pull this up. If you sent me this image, I
knew this was going to be a big one for you, so I said that. Yeah.
I will find it and then I will post it.
It's the other past tense one. There's a street scene, and then there's the one where they're in the background walking, and you have.
This is this one, right? This is this image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's them in the background, but you've got all the homeless and the cardboard box people and everything, and he's talking. But you're saying
this is where Star Trek sometimes has a way of creating these connective dots of a larger tapestry, if you will, that exist across the series that create all the texture that you talk about, Larry. And Bashir's Bashir's moment of frustration and venting, I think, is one of these moments where he's saying, why? How could it let people? How could people just not care and turn a blind eye to the plight of all of these people who are struggling? Because we know they have the resources. Look at these people who are so wealthy, who are living such fabulous lives. How can they just not care at everything that's happening in their backyard? And Cisco's response is sort of like Kirk's response at the end of A Private Little War. He's like, I don't know. I don't know. There's no right answer here. But it's this connective tissue that ties into the fallout of World War III. I don't mean the nuclear fallout, but I mean the geopolitical fallout, because we're just talking about Earth here. And the big amazing thing to me about Star Trek is not replicators, and it's not this economic future, but it's about how we get from this, which is what we see in First Contact, that this a planet really in disarray, governments just sort of in a total state of disaster from
you got a brilliant guy about to invent Earth's version. I was going to say Earth's version of warp drive. People say Zefram Cochrane invented warp drive. I go, no. He invented warp drive on Earth because other people on other planets did the same.
I mean, the Vulcans got there with a certain warp engine. So
but the Vulcan castaways, renegades, ran off with when your mother was in diapers and even further back. But the Earth inventor of warp drive, who's this brilliant scientist, he and Lily and his assistant or his fellow scientist, whatever you want to, not Matthew Henson her to Admiral Peary there too much. People say, Lily did everything that Cochrane did except backwards and in heels. But that's a Fred Ginger reference. Fred Rogers. Okay, forget it. Anyway, the fact that you had these brilliant scientists developing warp drive in the midst of this, they're scrounging around using, tin shingling and duct tape and baling wire. And he has a pretty good looking, capsule by the time he's done. And he's redoing parts from an unused Titan 5 or 4, whatever it was, the advanced Titan model. This missile that didn't get used in the war, that just happens to be down the road from where he is. Or maybe that's why they're in. Originally, that wasn't Bozeman. That was just called. They were going to call that Resurrection City, like it was just a camp. And it got retconned to be after Brannon got off on his thing about making warp drive invented in Bozeman, because Bozeman is one of his 5 hometowns. That's all a Brannon thing, by the way. So then, retroactively, in Voyager, and especially Voyager, they would talk about Cochrane and meeting the Vulcans in Bozeman. But the point is, Bozeman's a decent-sized city. It's not a metropolis, but it's a decent-sized city now. And the fact that that's Bozeman, the damage of World War III, and the fact that the established powers had all been messed. China and U.S. at least, and whatever
the Eastern
allies.
Coalition.
Yeah, the econ and all that. But the fact that civilization survived, they weren't nuclear wintered into oblivion. But the fact that this guy is able to have this major scientific breakthrough with squalor like that, and with most people living, it shows there's always going to be kind of a duality, but he was stuck with it. They were all stuck with having to help me out here. You go down. Yeah.
So they're
using the Titan Museum in Arizona for a film site, but the basic thing remains that in that world, they're down in the silo. You see consoles, you see high-tech gear that wasn't bombed out, that still exists, and you've got that past tense kind of dichotomy of there is at least some tech surviving among the ruins of what most people are having to live with 10 years after World War III.
Yeah, as Justin just said, Justin, by the way, if this is your first time here, welcome. Pre-First Contact Earth had huge scarcities, and when you had this level of destruction, they still have advanced technology. There's still pockets of it, but there's huge inequity. Being able to move resources around is something that a government can do very well. A government can make sure that people have access to basic utilities. Or not. And I think that's we only get a real small glimpse of this Yeah, I know. Vaccines, which back to our the beginning of this episode and why we're talking about scarcity right now. But we get a very brief glimpse of this post World War III, pre first contact Earth, and it's not pretty. But in a matter of years, what is it, about 150 years, Larry, from first contact to the launch of the Enterprise? Is that right?
Oh,
Or is it 100
90
years?
90
90
years.
years.
Yeah.
So let's just round up. Let's say 100 years. In 100 years, we get from that to this world where they have solved problems like hunger, disease, poverty. So it's not replicators, folks.
Not since I started restreaming here, but this used to happen with me when I was only Facebook.
Well, folks are coming back. Folks are immediately back. Hey, folks, we are sorry about that. Sorry about what happened. Hopefully, you are.
It was only for a minute or so. Hopefully, yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, folks are coming back in. So, I was just about to connect the dots, Larry. I was just about to connect the dots. So.
The dot 7s and the dot 47s and the dot 26s and the dot whatevers. Yeah. The dot.
So sorry, folks, for the little tech error there. It looks like most of you are back here. Thanks for being back. So what I was about to say is... what was I about to... Okay. So in about 100 years, we get from First Contact, Scarcity, Huge Inequities, to Star Trek Enterprise, and overcoming disease, hunger, poverty. And so what got us there was not transporters, not replicator technology. It was not just the Vulcans. It wasn't some type of post-scarcity economy. But it was this realization that if we do not work together here, and if we do not unite together under some big goals, we're in trouble, folks. And I always remember that Star Trek's utopian future begins with a dystopian story. It begins with World War III, and
it's like the cultural version of an individual that I've seen this. I heard the phrase, when somebody crashes and burns. It's like sometimes you have to hit total bottom before you know how bad things can get, before you have an appreciation for living normally or living fulfilled or being able to grow. It's like you take those things for granted, you have no idea. And I think that's very true culturally. I think it's really true right now. We have a whole segment of the population that has no clue. They either have no clue or they actively distrust the acquired common wisdom that we've had given to us, which is always one of those scare tactics about how we'd wind up with a nuclear war or something, that people lose touch with the foundations, the common wisdom or the corporate memory well or whatever. That there's those guys that have the 4-generational cycle. I've said many times, thank God we are not having a depression and a world war right now, because a lot of this generation, not age, but a lot of people living today would never have made it through what the greatest generation did in the 30s and 40s, because they've come so far away from what want is and the effect of actions on a mass scale and how bad things can get. They have no clue, and they have the arrogance of the unknowing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's why Bashir doesn't understand. Like, culturally, they're in such a different place. It reminds me, we started up top at the hour, or the last hour, talking about history and how what's the line again? The past is the way in which we... What the future?
Oh, illuminate or light the future?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a strong parallel here between World War II and Europe's attempt to rebuild with the European Union. And while there's been ups and downs on this journey, the idea of the EU was a really fascinating one, Larry, and I think there's a lot of parallels here with what happened during that era between First Contact and Star Trek Enterprise. The Europeans leaders made this decision that we need to intertwine ourselves so much that it would not make any sense for us to go to war with each other at all. And the way they did that was by forming the EU and making their economies completely interdependent with
in incremental steps. It reminds me a lot of Articles of Confederation in the U.S., or even more tellingly, the Coalition of Planets first.
Yeah.
And they did the first step to get everybody there, and then they realized they needed to be even tighter in a federation, and then the UFP comes along. The line you're talking about is, the past is the only light with which we can see the future.
Yes. Yeah. And
I
think there's a lot here. There's a lot we could keep talking about, but I just wanted to share those dots. These dots are all sort of connected here.
Well, and I said last night that would be perfect place to go set a new Star Trek series. I haven't thought about. I mean, it cycles around. I've had other places too, but like we're talking about where we're going to put the 47 new Star Trek series. There's so much unexplored background in canon, and having a series in that time frame would be awesome. You can even do one of those, like it's a short season and it exists every 2 or 3 decades apart, and you see some progression. But in the interim time between World War III and First Contact, like World War III, First Contact, and then say Archer's time. I sent you one. We were talking about how fast Earth came back.
Yeah.
The reason I sent you one of little Johnny Archer with his dad and his airplane, his rocket model there, is if he's about 10, this is like, what did I say? This is like 2120 or 2130 or something. No, not that. 2110s, 20s. Anyway, this is only about 50, 60 years after World War III. So unless they're in a protected area or something, and they could very well been, that's kind of, or they were among the privileged, which if he's a warp scientist working for the United Earth, they may have been in a more privileged class. Yeah. So it may not be the best, barometer, but Earth did not go to the shits. I mean, we already saw Cochrane was able to put together the first warp craft from scrap. So they weren't totally bombed back to the Stone Age, or everybody wasn't. Some were and some weren't. But anyway, they were able to function, but they bounced back and brought everybody along. By the time you see the launch and you see them celebrating and you see him chasing down Hoshi in Brazil, or wherever it was she was. I mean, they're running around the world. They talk about it. The Xindi attack. Everybody's pretty united there. They've done something to pull everybody along by, within that 100 years. So
yeah.
And that would be, I think that would be worth a series set in that time.
I think that I agree with you, Larry.
Now that
maybe this is maybe this is a good time to move forward to our counselor's log, unless there's something else you want to.
Oh, I was trying to remember if there's anything I sent you on the side, but I think we've. Yeah,
I think we've covered the big ones here.
Yeah.
There was this. I don't know if you wanna get into this.
Oh, I was saying, well, this is paired up with the other scrapyard. So in this time, the Emerald Chain, another example of this was kind of like nonlinear this week on my the Emerald Chain, Hunan, the salvage yard, where they've got slave people working on, it looks very Star Warsy, where they're taking apart old ships and scrap, and they're dealing in scrap. That's a perfect example of the Emerald Chain is very much dealing with scarcity, because salvaging old parts, it's not just we'll de-replicate it, and there's the orbitals junkyards, and there's all the surface base where the action of the story happens. And that's a total sign that, I mean, they might have replicators, but they're not widespread because people are actually making an industry out of recycling, which, yay, that's good. But, in the height of Federation times, it was like, just take your dirty uniform, throw it in the de-replicator, and just take it back to atoms again and molecules, and then we'll make some new stuff later. We'll make some new apples. That's the one thing about the Apple shit scene is that it's like, well, that's what they've always been. Carl
Yeah.
Sagan, you're
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
star stuff. I mean, everything goes
Yeah.
down to its whether it's shit or it's an actual apple or it's I don't know, name it. Everything goes down to moleculars, atoms, and then comes back in a replicator. But it made the point, I guess. But in that whole world of theirs, salvage now, and then I threw in the Qualar 7 or Qualar 2 scrapyard there. They were scrapping ships, but it was like a logical, like why should we? There was a lot of replication involved in these huge vehicles. So, because that's TNG era, that's like height of the Federation and the technology at its height. So it's like, yeah, they still had scrapyards and they still had shipyards, but it was like it made sense in a resource allocation model. Like don't take everything down just because you can. Pull the parts off, and lesser cultures that we trade with might want that. So that's one thing. But what you saw on Hunan there in Discovery was a total. We're back to this because when you see homeless people pushing along their garbage, their shopping carts because they're recycling cans out of the dumpster, that's the Hunan level there. Don't you think?
Yes.
Talking about scarcity? Yeah. Anyway, that's what that was. So anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of, I think that we can also kind of tie these pieces as well. I think the reason why we're seeing so much of this stuff in the 32nd century, one of the reasons I'll get to in a second with the counselor's log, but the other reason is it makes sense that over the centuries there has been interstellar supply routes, everything works. These planets are all interconnected. Trade is interconnected. Resources are interconnected.
The technology has reached the scale to where that makes it's like settling the American West. You had to come across on a wagon train 6 months, and people live long enough to take a plane back in 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And if that was all suddenly disrupted by this dilithium crisis, all the operations, all the support, people would be stranded in all sorts of places. It would be a big mess, and that's
You're
what we're
back
seeing.
to horse and buggy days.
Yeah, we're seeing the big mess there. So let's jump into the counselor's log. So the counselor's log is the part of the show where I do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the psychology or the mental health here at play in this episode. And this is one that I'm very excited to talk about because when I first learned about this research, it helped me to understand so much of what has gone on in my life, but also what's going on in the lives of others. So when we think about issues like poverty, people talk about a lot of things that have contributed to it, whether it's education, access to resources, living conditions, political representation, history, things like slavery in the United States that has really kept the wealth out of a large group of people. There's a lot of reasons why people might be in a situation where they're experiencing poverty. Mm-hmm. But what has really confounded researchers for a long time is why do some people who have limited resources make decisions that might perpetuate those limited resources? So, for example, why do people who are in poverty, why do they also spend so much money playing the lottery? Or why might they have difficulty saving money? Why might they have not take advantage of programs that are available to them to sort of help them? So psychologists have sort of looked into this problem, and what seems to be the case is when you have a scarcity of a resource, and it doesn't have to be money, it doesn't have to be housing, it doesn't have to be food, it can be time, it might even be scarcity of friends. Whatever scarcity you're experiencing, your mind goes to red alert. And all it does is focus on that immediate problem. And this was probably a very good thing when we were hunter-gatherers and you were hungry and your mind completely focused on, you're hungry, get food. You're hungry, get food. How can you get food? But flash forward now thousands of years later, and having scarcity of, let's say, money to pay the bills, your mind goes to red alert. you completely focus on that problem, and you ignore other problems that might be building up. You're not very good at solving those other problems, and you often make not the best decisions as well. It's it Whatever the scarcity is, it's hogging all of your resources, and this has been shown in experiments as well. There are this kind of research is very hard to do because you can't randomly assign people to poverty or wealth. That's not the way the world works. But psychologists have found these groups of folks in India, these sugarcane farmers. And before their harvest, they're quite poor. After their harvest, they're quite wealthy. And if you look at the way people think between those two times, the same exact people, before their harvest, when they're poor, all of their resources are focused on how am I going to pay these bills. They're not good at solving problems. They ignore other problems. But when they're wealthy, they have much better long-term thinking. They're more flexible in their thinking. They make better decisions. So poverty not only, scarcity not only is a stressor in itself, but it completely hogs all of our ability to solve problems. This is why, Larry, people who might be struggling to pay the bills, they might ignore things that are failing around them in their home, and until they completely fail, and now it's a much more expensive repair. If they caught it earlier, they might have been able to do something about this. I experience this all the time with scarcity of time. So my weekdays time is pretty scarce now, but when I was finishing up grad school, it was even worse. And so what happened to me is I had so limited time, I didn't open my mail as it came in. And so I would forget to pay certain bills, and then they would build into a bigger challenge, and they would become a much bigger stressor that I wasn't able to solve.
It dominoed. Yeah.
It dominoes. Yeah. So, and this might happen even with loneliness. People who have a scarcity of friends might spend a lot of time thinking about how do I solve this problem, and then when they actually interact with people, they might act in ways that might actually push people away. So scarcity is something that it really robs us of our ability to solve problems effectively. I think this is playing out right now with 2021, and it is hard to fight this pandemic when you have a scarcity of income and money. One of the reasons why people might be making very dumb decisions when it comes to navigating the pandemic is they've lost jobs. They do not know how they're going to pay their bills, and they haven't had enough support come in. So how can you even think about navigating a pandemic when you don't have money to buy food, you don't have money to pay rent? And Larry, I think this is playing out in the 32nd century as well. The Federation, the Guild, the Emerald Guild, which sounds like something like it's out of Wizard of Oz.
Chain. Yes,
Emerald Chain. I'm sorry, the Emerald Chain.
Emerald Guild. No, the Emerald Guild would be out of D&D or something. So yeah, okay.
Right. They're making decisions that are purely focused on the scarcity issues that they have, and they're ignoring all these other big problems. This federation has lost a lot of members. What the heck is going on that is leading them to lose Vulcans and Romulans? What's happening here? And Trill. There are a lot of bigger problems at play.
And Earth.
And Earth. My goodness, Earth.
But notice, half of the Emerald Chain, much less half of Federation, is human. It's like there are a lot of humans that didn't go, I'm not going to stay stuck on this planet and hide behind the wall. It's like everything's. I'm amazed they didn't get blown up. And you can say, well, the Earth case, they were fighting the Reavers. No, wait, that's wrong franchise. They were fighting the people they didn't know were also human. It was like Terra Nova times 1,000. But they didn't know they were human. But still, they had kind of a motivation for pulling back inside. But no, I said this right off the bat. It's like, wait a minute. Half of that Federation headquarters, or more, way more than half, is staffed by humans. There were a lot of humans who didn't go along with the official Earth decision, and there's a lot of humans fighting on the Emerald Chain side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, it's like
Yeah.
things were all loosey goosey.
I mean, I think when you start to see this, you'll start to notice it in many ways in your life. Where once you see like, oh, this is actually a scarcity issue. My time is actually a scarcity issue. When you see it in that way, you'll see these ways in which it makes you go red alert, and all your attention, you divert all your power, all your resources to this problem, to the detriment of everything else around you. This is one of the reasons why high interest loans heavily target people who are economically poor. These high interest loans are horrible. Sometimes the interest rates on these are like as high as 800%, but they reduce some of the immediate problems that people have. So, but people who are struggling with when there's a scarcity of money, they might take these loans and not look at, well, this is going to keep me in such big problems in the future, but you know what? It's alleviating some of my problems now. They take them because of how scarcity warps our mind. It's the same way why sometimes I would say, oh yeah, no, I can totally do that extra thing. I can totally do that extra thing when I have a scarcity of time, because I think, oh, in the future I'll have more time. No, you won't. It's the same. It's going to be the same as it is now. Anyways, to connect it back to Trek and connect it back to post World War III era and Star Trek Enterprise era, we can't get to Star Trek Enterprise until we solve some of these basic scarcity issues that we have right now. And when we do, what this research really outlines is everyone is capable of making the really dumb decisions that we make when there's scarcity. But if we solve some of those scarcity issues, we might be unlocking a big potential of people to contribute to society in a way that could get us to that utopian future. What unlocked potential is out there because people don't have enough money to pay their rent, or people don't have enough money to pay for their food. So, all right, I said a lot. I'll come back to this in the away mission.
Yes, because we have a watch along and a guest to still squeeze in.
Oh my God!
Oh
my God! No, I would just leave. Larry, can you indulge us in a K3 factor?
I can. It'll be kind of on a general level, but so here's the K3 factor, guys, where I take this week's theme and apply it to what my realm of the world is. Whoa, here in Trekland, we're gonna deep dive for a second and apply this to the real world side of Star Trek. And one of the most, and again, I'm going to go back to the original series, scarcity. And the first thing that popped up for me was something you mentioned, scarcity of time as a production and individual people in the production. The two things, the big two of all production, film and especially TV, time and money. It's all about those. Time and money are the two scarce resources. So I had an order. If you can put up what I sent you in order.
Yeah. Let me pull it up.
One of them is a very technical picture. I'm sure none of you have ever seen it before. Oh, look, it's the original series bridge. And I have that there because...
No bloody A, B, C, D.
Right. It's from from either one of those. The source was This Side of Paradise and then Relics. That awesome line. I love that line. I use it all the time. People in the day... And it's in Technicolor or whatever. Paramount Vision. Back in the day, that was awesome. And yet, if you look at, I was digging and I didn't find a good one, but if you look at the set from a year earlier, done for black and white and then updated for color, the set for, say, Lost in Space, that was supposed to be in the 1990s, and it was a human family, and of course, Lost in Space, it was Lost. The original Lost in Space was what it was. And it even started off serious and went goofy. But the sets for Lost in Space were full of all what everyone thought in 1964 were, all the blinkies. What Nick Meyer would later say, I want more blinkies in his Enterprise. It's blinking. It's people, the computer, there's even one section with computer tape, with the reels of computer tape, like what Kirk and Sulu found in the Omaha military base in Tomorrow's Yesterday. Old school 1960s thing. But this was supposed to be in the future, much less our future, much less Star Trek's future. My point is that when they sat down to design a futuristic cockpit, what did they think would sell with the audience? Rows of blinky lights. Rows of blinky lights. We have no idea what they do. They're not labeled, aside from a couple of big, bat cave type labels on things. We have no idea. But it's like throw a bunch of blinky lights and people go, ooh, computers. Well, 1964 person would say, ooh, computers.
Right.
We look back now, we laugh at the Lost in Space rows and rows of blinky lights that mean nothing. And we look at Star Trek, and at the time it was cool and it was in color. And then eventually people got into the 80s and 90s and all the fanboys and girls trying to retcon things and going, no, wait a minute, there's no labels. You can put Spock up there. Here's what's awesome about it. Basically, Matt Jeffries and Jimmy Rugg, who wired the visual, look at Spock's console. There's like rocker switches and tons of lights, and there actually are graphics on those panels. Thank you, Doug Drexler, eventually. But it's not Lost in Space. It's trying to be futuristic, but there's a lot of unlabeled stuff there that they could, obviously they didn't, the motion picture, the phase 2 motion picture sets, they actually sat down and labeled all the buttons because that was the thing of the day. But my point here is Irwin Allen had a ton of money for the Lost in Space pilot. And they did not have a ton of money on a pilot that failed and then had to be redone and then redone. In fact, Gene Roddenberry writes about how the standard studio reaction was, Gene, baby, what are you spending all this money for? Just put a bunch of lights on a bunch of consoles and just fly your ship and go. What are you doing? And he was trying to do, let's have it planned. Let's have science consulting. Let's have Harvey Lin from the Rand Corporation talk. He had a limited budget, but he was trying to make it go with what he did. And even then he was spending way more money than what NBC or Desilu thought he ought to be spending. And what Matt Jeffries and Jim Rugg came up with was a look in that bridge that looked very powerful, even though it wasn't the 1960s version of just rows and rows and rows of blinky lights. So now today we would look back at, in the 80s and 90s, we would say they were so powerful that they didn't have to label their buttons because they were programmable. They were programmable. We had a whole retcon for, and the hull being smooth pre-Star Wars, and then Star Wars having all the surface texture to make the models look bigger. The whole Star Trek conceit used to be, it's so powerful, you don't see the guts of the thing. You don't see the labels. It's so powerful, and they're so smart, you don't have to make it look like it's out of the 60s or Star Wars. So, but that was a concession to scarcity. Scarcity drove the design parameters that made, and Mike Okuda will talk about this, made them all, and even Next Generation, scarcity was, we don't have a lot of money here, and Mike came up with the whole touch screen, they could take one piece of plastic and shoot a camera thing and bang, we're not gluing a million little half marbles, and then wiring them all to make a flash go off. We're just going to do it. It was cheaper, but it looks so much more futuristic. Now I've got
it looks
one.
So good.
I've got a couple more, and I'll go through real fast. This also applied to visual effects, and people argue, you can't make that bigger, can you?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, if you look at the third one down there, basically he's saying this is the writer's guide for the second season of Next Generation, but it had been the same thing all the way through the original. They're still saying here, don't do space battles. They cost too much money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and they're not as interesting as people think.
Yeah. And they're not as interesting. And we want to do people stories, not space battle stories. So when CG came along and made space battles easier to do, they're there. And some might say that the pendulum has swung too far. They're cool to see. And if they really push the story, okay. If they're just there for gratuity, whatever. Anyway, so that brings me up to today. I've got the one that you thought was there. It's back to, of all things, Nemesis. So here's what's amazing about this picture. I wish I could get this in a bigger. Oh, I can. Here's what's amazing about this picture. The way they've had so much money to spend on the JJ movies, and then much has been said about this, but the next gen movies the original series too, but they had a unified, Paramount TV and movies was all the same, and they had such a warehouse of stuff that Herman Zimmerman was brilliant at recycling things. Again, scarcity and time and money. And they would, and a lot of us know, a lot of fans know about how they would dumpster dive. The things in the original series on the walls were mailing package forms. They were recycling everything and spray painting it colors and putting it on the wall. But that scene, could you put that back up? That scene you just had. This is, I used to do back in the day in 2003 and 4. I would do this on my con shows. So this front console here that the Riemann is sitting at, that's a Klingon console. Okay. These two Riemanns on the side, those circular consoles, those are the consoles that are in the pit in Ops on DS9.
Wow.
That were repainted. There's a little bit of surface stuff. And this, there's something in here from Enterprise I've forgotten in the moment. But
the screens, the LCD screens, they look like they're from Enterprise.
They might be. But Shinzon's chair is I think it's a Nissan small pickup truck bed line, a rubberized bed liner from a pickup truck over the wheel well. So they've cut it down, turned it sideways. This part here is like the inside of a wheel well of a pickup. But that's what they would do. The chairs in the I was just looking at this, the little fighter that they had, that Data and Picard are flying in. The seats in that, Herman was always pulling out seats from European sports cars, but they loved Recoro seats that were in Porsches. Those seats were, so the point here is they got so much, they used to say it's just more bang for the buck, but they were so good at modern day equivalent of dumpster diving or just using what they didn't throw anything away, which is what people in a scarcity economy, like Depression kids, grew up not throwing anything away and becoming hoarders. They don't throw anything away in the Emerald Chain. And on Star Trek production, before they got tons of money thrown at them, they don't throw anything away. They kept warehouses and warehouses of that stuff and would go use it. And fans today, it wasn't done just so everybody could sit around on Trek Core or Memory Alpha or X Astra, whatever, and track all the reuses of props and ship models. It was done to save money because they had to, because of scarcity. So there you go, guys. Deep dive. Did I surprise you? I love that one scene that's supposed to be a Riemann-built Romulan craft, and there's Enterprise, Klingon, Cardassian, and Toyota.
I didn't know about the Riemann stuff being reused. It almost looks like Shinzon's bridge a little bit. It almost looks like for Shinzon's bridge they reuse some of the Riemann stuff, but I don't know if that's true.
They wouldn't, because of course by then they were like, we have to make it all because this is going to be such an awesome movie you won't even remember the old Star Treks before today. There was a lot of arrogance. So no, it's like they wouldn't. It had all been auctioned. Most of it had either been trashed or auctioned by then. The Christie's auction, or their licensing grabbed a few things. We have museum shows, guys. Don't throw it all away. We'll put up the money to store a few things. Anyway.
Well,
I hope so. I did surprise you again. Yay!
You did surprise me. I always look forward to the K3 for that reason. So, the away mission. This is the part of the show where I want to give you some way to apply what we've been talking about to your own life. So, one thing that I neglected to mention a little bit earlier, I was looking at my notes, and I wanted to mention this is, in light of your K3, sometimes scarcity does make you more effective at solving that problem. Scarcity as a team can lead to more creative problem solving. Scarcity as an individual over the long term leads to a lot of the problems that we've identified in the counselor's log. But that being said, when it comes to poverty, people who are in poverty are better at finding ways to save money. They are better at finding a good deal. They are better at reusing things. And I think some of that speaks to what you're talking about here in the K3 as well. When there are some limitations, you have to work within those limitations. And it's still, I think the difference here between the K3 and the counselor's log is it's still enough money to make a show. Like, you can still make the show, you just have to work in these limitations. The kind of scarcity I was talking about in the counselor's log is when you really don't have enough money to pay rent. You don't have enough money for food. Like you really are stretching yourself thin, and it's over the long term, and it's
Get
related to your
into this.
livelihood as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so what do we do about it? Well, let me say the hard one first, which is the stuff that many of us don't really have any control over. Although, who knows? Maybe there's someone watching who does. The first thing is really to back off on people who are struggling with scarcity. So what I mean by that is people who might be unemployed. We make it so hard in some of our states to get unemployment benefits. But when you are unemployed, you have a huge scarcity of income. You're not going to be that great at filling out mountains of paperwork because of this red alert system that I was just talking about. People have less they have more what's called cognitive load, and they have less bandwidth. They're not very well equipped at completing something very difficult like filing for unemployment. So we need to make it easier and more flexible for people who are in situations involving scarcity to get help. This is why, a big thing in the news this week was not unemployment, but coronavirus aid that the United States was passing. And there was a bit of a debate. Are we going to have $600 checks or $2,000 checks? When people are in these situations of scarcity, they need relief. Like some relief and some flexibility goes a long way to helping people take care of themselves and not fall into some of the traps that I outlined with the scarcity thinking. But again, those are hard solutions to take into account. They're not easy things you can apply to your life today. So
And are all referenced in past tense when they showed the
yeah,
futility of making these poor people go in and do all the paperwork. And even the
yes.
bureaucrats. I forget her name, the character's name, but she's just as frustrated and burned out as the people applying for the aid are, that it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, so what? No, that's a great point, Larry. I forgot, but yeah, you see that. You see
Mhm.
the actual futility with like, how am I supposed to fill this out when I'm going through all, like, this is so not. This doesn't make any sense. So what do we do? What can we do? I've got a couple ideas for you folks. So one is really really becoming more aware of when you are in the scarcity mindset, when your mind is going to this red alert, and when you are making these decisions. It sort of becomes like tunnel vision, where all you see is that problem. Like when people have scarcity of food,
Mhm.
when they're hungry. When you're hungry, Larry, what's the
Nothing
only thing you think
makes.
of?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
food. That's it. It's very hard to think of anything else.
It's almost as if it's gnawing at you.
Yeah. Or thirst. If you're thirsty, it's
Mhm.
all you're going to be thinking about. It's going to be very hard to think about anything else. So, like, part of me wants to be like the doctor who says, "Does it hurt when you do this? Yeah, then don't do that." Part of me wants to be like that and say, like, well, if you're hungry, go feed yourself. But then you wouldn't, like, obviously, you're not struggling with this issue if it's so easy to solve. So one thing we all need to do is get a little bit better at identifying when we're in that scarcity mindset. And the big eye opener for me has been like time, like when I get into scarcity time mindsets, and I let all my emails fill up, I let my mail fill up, my snail mail. I don't tend to those things. I don't take out the trash when I'm in scarcity. Like everything,
Yeah.
you can tell. Like I don't do laundry. Like so what one thing is we need to be more aware of the signs that we're going into scarcity, and get better at addressing the things we're neglecting or the things we're pretty bad at solving. So one of the things that I do, I have reminders that go off for me of the big things I need to tend to that I usually neglect when I'm in that scarcity mindset. So, like for example, things like taking out the trash, doing laundry, looking at my mail. That's a big one for me because I let that completely neglect. And then get some help for those things. It's about knowing when you go in red alert, and then figuring out how can you tackle some of the things you're neglecting when you're more in a green alert type of state. So not easy stuff to do, but hopefully that's some food for thought to get people thinking about these states. And just I hope this is kind of wakes up people to realizing how much scarcity impacts your life every single day. So Larry, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I have been going through the chat because hey guys, I feel like we got kind of animated here. I had my soapbox time. Ollie did too. We kind of went on some rants, but we were back to our regular format. If some of you came to us from the virtual Trek convention, we're an event, by the way. I forgot to do a shout out for because I was noticing, I'm a little slow today, I guess, that we had a whole lot of new people at least in the beginning. So I want to say, I think we had a lot of new people. We had a lot of Twitchers.
No, we did, and we still are at much higher than normal.
So when you, by the way, see what he did just there, guys? It's somebody, who was it, said, what is it about Larry and live streaming? Aha, Justin. This was all on Ali. He's in the driver's seat until I am now where I can. But when we started, he had to take on all the producing chores. So that little glitch, I'd rather blame Ecamm or Restream than any of us. But it wasn't.
I think it was a random internet. I think something somewhere for a moment we lost the internet connection.
Don't tell me there's some kind of disparity in scarcity of Wi-Fi signal in the Bay Area. That can't.
Oh my gosh. If you want to talk about scarcity in the Bay Area, I could go off on a lot of stuff.
We had a few people. Who was it? Oh, Charlotte here was saying the same thing about tech.
Yeah.
Bay Area. So I just wanted to say, if you came to us today from Virtual TrekCon, special shout out, and that we're here every Saturday. And I'm on I'll say in a minute, I have a Tuesday show too, but Ollie and I do this every Saturday. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I saw Michael McAleer, Klingon Pop Warrior on Twitch. Hi again, Anne-Marie. Elia Chan Dimensions on Twitch. We had a lot of Twitch folks today. Louise A on YouTube. Theron on Twitch. May have been with us. Melanie Jean Mayfield, I think you've been with us before, but I want to say hi. And Sabrina Wood on Facebook. A lot of you knew her, that name. But welcome. Anyway, I saw a lot of new folks. And so hopefully we're not having a scarcity of people coming over to come in. Couple of points. People were talking
just a quick one while it's still fresh. Cairo says, Ollie, be careful. Green alert actually has been used as an actual alert now. It was used to display when Discovery cloaked. So much change happening. Thank you, Cairo, for fact checking me in this episode. It's actually really helpful. I forget about all these new changes and
you haven't seen every episode of Discovery 47 times yet? What's wrong with you?
No, I'm working on it. You
haven't had the time to do it?
Yeah, and also this comment from Wardogham.
Hi. Wardogheim is another new
Wardogheim.
Say hi.
Hardest part is making a plan when you're in red alert so you can actually get out of it. I totally agree with you. It's so hard to know you're in this state because, like hunger, everything is focused on that immediate thing. But maybe that's one sign.
I have the cave I talk about. When I've got something huge and pressing, and then I come out, it's like I'm not paying attention to social. I don't know what's going on in the world. And you come out of the cave and you go, okay, everybody, I've been in a cave for a week. What's going on? And you catch up. You hope you can. Hopefully it's something that it's merely, current events, or it's merely the fan chatter or whatever's going on. But it's like when you've got to wall yourself, or you've got a big deadline. I know you have no idea what that's like, Ollie.
Well, and one last thing before I turn it back to you. Jared says, I can vouch Ollie is terrible. I respond to get TMs that time. And I think Scott says he can confirm that as well. This is all very true, folks. This is all very true.
So did you get those 2 files moved over?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
See, Scott? See, guys? I say.
I'm working on it.
Just over the time in our chat, people were talking about we were talking about past tense, and on Virtual TrekCon and on the Seventh Rule podcast, and I don't know if Anna Marie's still with us. And anyway, a lot of people were talking about how Robert Hewitt Wolf was great talking about past tense. He co-wrote it. They had a watch along, or they were just talking about the episode, and he was great there. And I just wanted to chime in and say yes, he was my Portal 47 Open House guest last year, and he's great. Melanie Jean Mayfield was comparing Brexit with Fedzit.
With Discovery right now. I think that's a really strong parallel. I mean, there's a big parallel here, folks, between nationalism, xenophobia, and what's been happening around the world recently, and Star Trek Discovery this season. That part, I think, was very clearly intentional. I think they saw Brexit, they saw the rise of nationalism around the world, and that's been playing out with this season of Discovery.
Even before the pandemic. And Anne Marie, I want to say I loved your when Ali misspoke, and she's like, "We represent the Emerald Guild." The Emerald. And yes, there is a real Emerald Guild. It's an Irish association. It's an Irish trade association. But my mind went to D&D. But very much so. And War Dog and I had a point about people that take advantage of scarcity in individuals, like payday loans, loan sharks, pawn shops, taking advantage, people that are, and they're taking advantage of the fact that people are in that red alert mode.
Yes,
and they have a need for cash, absolutely, and they can't afford to look long term. So
absolutely, there are many industries built to completely take advantage of people being in this mindset, and it's horrible and unethical, and I think that stuff should be outlawed. But I'm not going to get on another soapbox because we have a lot of comments to hit.
Anyway, that's me cleaning up the chat. Thanks everybody. This has been an awesome. You guys were doing just great for us to be ignoring you for so long. So thanks.
There's a great comment here I want to get to about people on the other end of the income spectrum. Hopefully I can find it. But while I'm digging it up, one thing just to mention here is when scarcity isn't an issue, you're just not stressed about it. Your resources. Oh, okay. Here we go. Karen mentioned scarcity of understanding how this is for people in scarcity. Rich people just throw money at it. So this is where privilege. Exactly. The word privilege brings up so much for so many, but I think one of the most important things about privilege is when you have a certain privilege, it blinds you to the experience of others. And when you have the privilege of not really stressing about bills or rent or food, they're just not variables you think about.
There's like a threshold. Stressor. There's a plateau, and above that it's all gravy, but below that there is no gravy. There's no bread.
No, and quite literally. And so what happens is your resources, your mental resources are opened up to tackle other things. So for example, if you're so worried about how am I going to pay rent, you don't have the time or resources to help your kids with their homework. You don't. It's not going to happen. While when you have the resources to not worry about those bills, you can do more, like help your kids. You can do more, like attend more things.
Or look for work or create more work opportunities for yourself to get you more income to not be in that situation. It's hard to plan and grow when you're just surviving. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I hope people take away from this is a lot of this discussion does come to like resources and income and wealth and poverty, but scarcity happens in so many aspects of our lives. And time is one I think we can all, again, getting back to Star Trek Generations, time is the fire in which we burn. That's a scarcity mindset. Whereas Picard at the end saying time is a friend who comes along with us and reminds us that this moment will never come again. That's more of a non-scarcity mindset. I was actually thinking about this, Larry. The Nexus would be one place you could go to where there is no scarcity of time.
That's true.
Yeah, that was
thought I had. After my dad retired and I'd go visit him, and he'd just be sitting there watching TV or doing something, but after he got where he couldn't get up and get around, that's what got to him. But it was kind of morose, but it was true too. I'd say, okay, Dad, well, I'll call you or I'll do this or whatever, especially when we were distant. And he'd say, "It's all right, son. All I got's time."
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't even like a guilty parent thing by then. He was like stating a fact. And I was like, oh, yeah. Anyway, I didn't, but there are people that all they have is time.
Yeah.
And it's not a scarcity. It's almost like a burden. But anyway.
Yeah, the very last episode of the PBS show I've been doing, Self-Evident, comes out this Monday. And in this episode,
Okay.
yeah, so check it out, folks. It's fantastic. And we started the series by talking to 10-year-olds across the country about what it's like to be an American right now in 2020. I end the series by talking to people in their 80s about what it's like to be an American right now. And one of the individuals I talked to is actually a psychologist in her 80s. And she tells me that her relationship with time has completely changed. And she has the luxury of enjoying the small moments in her life now. The joy that she gets from a great cup of tea with friends and family is unlike anything she had elsewhere in her life. So maybe that is the great nexus that awaits us, is having the luxury of enjoying the small moments when we can, when there isn't a scarcity of time. Yeah.
My version of Tolly and Saran's line is, "Time is the fire in which we blur."
That's, I think, what it feels like. Yeah. Speaking of scarcity of time, Larry, we were sort of at that time. Yeah. So, Larry, as I start to play the sad music now, where can people find more of your work this week?
Well, at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, as always. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, that's my YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't. And you're watching Facebook, that's Facebook's hub. And yes, right now, I extended this because I didn't promote it very well before the end. But our big gift offer, our 6 month, which I do this is the second year. It was very popular last year. And again, it's 6 months of Portal 47 and come deep dive if you like the way I deep dived on K3. That's just a tip of the iceberg. And swag, it comes in an actual box. If you didn't get enough Trek in your stocking from Santa, be nice to yourself. Anyway, it's extended till January 5th, and then it will go away. So look on LarryNemecek.com, find the link, and you can go over to it. Otherwise, it's been great to launch the year with you. Ollie, how about you?
Yeah, this has been fun. We said we were going to do this for the duration of this pandemic, and hey, look, folks, we're still here.
Well, so's the pandemic, but
yeah. I know, yeah. A few months, and we'll be thinking about our 1-year anniversary. And next week, folks, we have the season finale of Star Trek Discovery. It's going to be our last episode that's inspired by Discovery. After that, we're going to be doing we're going to be going in some different directions.
Who knows what we're going to be
It'll be fun. It'll be exciting. We don't know what it's going to look like, but it'll be great. So this week, folks, you can find me, as always, on social media, at Ollie Mattu. And the last episode of PBS Digital Studios Self-Evident does come out on Monday, so check that out. And for more of my own content, check out The Psych Show on YouTube.
The PBS show is online only, streaming.
Yeah, it's online only. If you go to, I don't even know where. PBS Digital Voices, I think, is the YouTube.
Well, you're a good little
foot
soldier for your own cause, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, scarcity of time.
I know.
I'm
churning through so much stuff. I do something. You go, oh, I didn't promote that at all.
Yeah.
Lately.
Yeah.
But here we go,
folks.
World.
We, as Jared says, there will be a life support retreat this year. I hope we can see that day this year in 2021. And with that, folks, Happy New Year and live long.
In the chat here at some time. Yes. Trek well, everybody.